What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We're very close to the trade deadline now, only 8 days left at the time of making this video, and there's a lot of names starting to pop up and, a lot of teams starting to explore the market for a lot of their players. And one player that got brought up by Elliot Friedman at the end of the first intermission of the Jets and Islanders game was Nick Schmaltz. And at first, Nick Schmaltz doesn't come off like a massive name or anything, but check the score sheet, guys. This guy's lighting it up this season, and Elliot didn't go out and say, like, hey, he's definitely going to Winnipeg, or Winnipeg has definitely looked in on him, but he does expect that this is the type of player that Winnipeg would be looking at and assumes they will check in on him. And I think it makes a lot of sense, with the success that Nick Schmaltz has had. We'll go into that in just a minute. But for longevity's sake, Schmaltz is currently in the 4th year of his 7-year deal, where he does make $5.85 million per season, but he does not have a no-trade clause as of right now. His no-trade clause would kick in next season, so Arizona is looking to move him if they can find, the right package, obviously, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But yeah, no, I think this is a really interesting player that has a decent cap hit, and I think could really help this Jets team right now and for the future. If Pierre-Luc Dubois chooses that he doesn't want to be a Jet next season, then the Jets are going to need to do a hard pivot, right? Because obviously you can't have Adam Lowry as your second-line center. You probably don't want him as your third-line center, ideally. And now you got that big hole in that 2C slot. I think Nick Schmaltz could fill that exceptionally well. Right now he's having a fantastic season with Arizona, with Clayton Keller. Those two are just feeding off of each other. So far, at the time of making this video, he's played 42 games, scored 16 goals, and 21 assists for a total of 37 points. That's really good. That's close to a point per game pace, and that, secondary scoring would really help Winnipeg. Right now they could play him at 3C, or they could put him on the wing. They could kind of do really whatever. He can win faceoffs, he can play well defensively, he can be an offensive threat, he can be a playmaker. This is a guy that I really think the Jets should seriously look at. I think it's going to cost, a pretty penny, obviously, for a guy like this. But I really do think that this could help the Jets out a lot heading into the playoffs and into the future. Now, Nick Schmaltz has dealt with some injuries, this season and last season that has kept him out of the lineup a little bit, so I think that is a little bit of a concern. However, in his last 105 games in the NHL, he has 98 points, so he's very consistent points-wise and just an overall fantastic player. And I think that Winnipeg could benefit from his consistency a ton, because this is a team that often fails to be consistent at times. Whether you want to put him on the wing, help out Pierre-Luc Dubois, or maybe a Kyle Connor, Nick Ehlers, whoever you want, I think that he helps your top 6 big time. Or if you put him in the bottom 6, I think he makes a lot of players more dangerous. Whether you have a guy like Morgan Barron or anybody, I don't know. I assume the Jets are going to go out and get more than just a Nick Schmaltz. Let's say the Jets get Nick Schmaltz, and then they put him on the third line, and then they add a scoring winger with him. I think that revamps this team completely, and I think it's a lot of fun to think about going forward here, how much a Nick Schmaltz could help this Winnipeg Jets team. So we've kind of highlighted so far who Nick Schmaltz is, what he's good at, how he would help this Winnipeg Jets team if acquired, and his contract. But now we should be looking at what would it cost to bring in Nick Schmaltz. And right now there's no for sure proof of like what the market for him is, but I do assume it's going to be a first-round pick plus. He is a 27-year-old center putting up nearly a point per game pace at a pretty reasonable contract at 5.85. So he is going to be highly sought after, I'd imagine, especially if Timo Meier goes. I think that a lot of teams are going to look and kind of use it as a fallback option, because I don't think that's really much of a consolation prize at all. I think he's very good. One thing, though, that I think Winnipeg has an advantage of that a lot of teams don't have is cap flexibility. Right now, Winnipeg can kind of do whatever they want in free agency. They could take on Nick Schmaltz at full value, his full contract, and they wouldn't have to retain any salary if they didn't really need to. I don't expect Arizona to be willing to accept any retained salary on their end. I think that it would have to be a third-party broker, and even then I would think it would be pretty expensive, with it being a whole 3 years of that contract being retained. That's pretty risky for any team, because obviously, a lot can happen in 3 years. You can be dealing with cap hell and everything else, but I don't think the Jets would really need to retain cap, and I think that would go a long way to helping them really make a deal, and I think Arizona would be more appreciative of that as well. I do think it would be a first-round pick, and Arizona's looking for prospects. They're looking for picks. They're not there right now. They are playing pretty well right now, but obviously Nick Schmaltz at 27, not going to be there when the Coyotes are good. So who should the Jets give up? I think that they have to look at maybe a Chaz Lucius or a Ville Heinola to add to this deal, and then maybe a third piece to that deal, maybe a first, a prospect, and either another prospect or maybe a third, maybe a second, somewhere in there. And it is going to be a lot for Nick Schmaltz, but you have to pay to play in the NHL, and especially at the trade deadline. I think that Arizona is going to be looking for a big prospect on the defensive side, because they do have Dylan Guenther, who's probably going to be a full-timer on that Arizona team next season. You've got Logan Cooley, who's very close to being a full-time NHLer. I do expect him to be in the NHL sooner rather than later. That guy is electric. So you've got two stud forward prospects. On the defensive side, I think that Ville Heinola makes a lot of sense in Arizona. Obviously, he's not getting playing time here in Winnipeg, and it's just due to a lot of, veterans with cap in front of him. I think that he would really help out this Coyotes team in the future if he does end up panning out and being a consistent NHL defenseman, which I think he will be. He just needs some NHL time to get comfortable with the game, and I think that Arizona would be the perfect place for Ville, honestly. I don't think that he'd have much of a problem fitting in with the young crowd there, and I think that he brings a lot of fun and excitement to that team. He's a very fun player. He's a fantastic puck mover, and with Arizona probably losing Chychrun and Shane Gostisbehere at this trade deadline, those are two really important defensemen to that Coyotes team, both puck movers. They're very much like Ville Heinola. So can Heinola jump in a couple years and really fill one of those roles for the Coyotes? I think it would go a long way. And even then, right, you've got Ville. He's a young guy at 21, turning 22 this year. He's going to be young enough to jump in with this team. He'll be in his prime when this team is going forward and when this team is good, when their prospects have, grown and been in the NHL for a little while. So I think that would make sense. And I think that's almost a no-brainer. I think Arizona would be interested in a guy like Heinola. So a first, Heinola, maybe another prospect, maybe another pick, but that's kind of where I think it goes. Maybe Dmitry Reshevsky's rights. Obviously, he is signed in the KHL right now. He won't be in the NHL for another couple years, but maybe Arizona doesn't care about that. Maybe they're just going to wait out the couple years and then sign him, right? Because I do think that, again, he could help that team in a couple of years when he's NHL ready. But yeah, that's just me kind of spitballing ideas here. Don't take any of that as completely true stuff that is going to happen, but I do think that it makes sense for Winnipeg, and I think that it makes sense for the Coyotes. Overall, I think that this would help the Jets a ton, and I think that it would help the Coyotes a ton. They're not going to need Nick Schmaltz in the future, and the Jets could use Nick Schmaltz now and for the future, so I think it's a win-win on both sides. But what do you guys think? I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Very exciting times coming. We are only a week out from the trade deadline. I'm so excited. I love this time of the year. One of my favorite times of the NHL season. I've completely cleared my schedule, so I'm fully ready for Friday. Expect a ton of videos on deadline day, but I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Go Jets, go, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.